Hi friends, today uh, I have come up with another interesting topic of English literature, that is first lines of important books in English literature. This is a part 1 video, and we will have another video on the first lines of important books in English literature, because there are many books, and today I have chosen some of the important books, and we will discuss other books in our next video. The first book is Fahrenheit 451. It is written by Ray Bradbury. The first line of the novel is, "It was a pleasure to burn." The novel was written in 1953. It is a dystopian novel. The book's tagline explains the title, Fahrenheit 451, the temperature at which book paper catches fire and burns. The lead character of the novel is Guy Montag, is a fireman who becomes disillusioned with his role of censoring literature and destroying knowledge, eventually quitting his job and committing himself to the preservation of literary and cultural writings. Ray Bradbury's 1953 novel Fahrenheit 451 is set in a dystopian society which burns books in order to control dangerous ideas and unhappy concepts. The city in which the novel is set had a government which is despotic, and the government orders to burn the books and to destroy the books which have good ideas, and they think that books will bring about a change in society. That's why they burn the books. The novel tells the story of a person called Guy Montag, who is a fireman, and he questions the book burning policy and undergoes extraordinary suffering and transformation as a result. Guy Montag, in the early stages of the novel, burns the books. He is a fireman, he burns the book, but later on he changes his mind and starts questioning the policy of the government, and for which he is tortured nothing like anything by the government. The novel is divided into three parts. Part 1 is called as The Hearth and the Salamander. Part 2 is called as The Sieve and the Sand. And the third part is called as Burning Bright. Uh, the next novel is 1984. Subtitle is a novel which is written by George Orwell. The first line of the novel is, "It was a bright day in April and the clocks were striking 13." The novel was published as 1984. It is also a dystopian novel. Dystopian means a Holocaust novel which deals with the future aspects of the human world. The important terms of this novel are Oceania, which stands for London, Big Brother, Doublethink, Thought Crime, Newspeak, Room Number, Room 101, Telescreen, 2 plus 2 equal to 5, 5, Prole, Memory Hole. In the novel, Winston Smith, the hero of the novel, struggles with oppression in Oceania, a place where the party scrutinizes human actions with ever watchful Big Brother. Defying a ban on individuality, Winston dares to express his thoughts in a diary and pursues a relationship with Julia. These criminal deeds bring Winston into the eye of the opposition, who then must reform the nonconformist. George Orwell's 1984 introduced the watchwords for life without freedom. Big Brother is watching you. The main characters, the main character Winston Smith is a non-conformist. He doesn't conform with the policies of the government, which is led by a person called Big Brother, and that is the reason why he is punished. Winston Smith is punished. The important characters of the novel are Winston Smith, Julia, O'Brien, Big Brother, Emmanuel, Goldstein are the important characters of the novel. The setting of 1984 is a dystopia, an imagined world that is far worse than our own, as opposed to a utopia, which is an ideal place or state. Other dystopian novels include Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451, and George Orwell's Animal Farm. George Orwell wrote 1984 in the year 1984. The year that gives the book its title was still almost 40 years in the future. Some of the things Orwell imagined that would come to pass were the telescreen, a TV that observes those who are watching it, and a world consisting of three megastates rather than hundreds of countries. In the novel, the country of East Asia apparently consists of China and its satellite nations. Eurasia is the Soviet Union, and Oceania comprises the United States, the United Kingdom, and their allies. Another of Orwell's creations for 1984 is Newspeak, a form of English that the book's totalitarian government utilizes to discourage free thinking. Orwell believed that without a word or words to express an idea, the idea itself was impossible to conceive and retain. Thus, Newspeak has eliminated the word bad, replacing it with less harsh, ungood. The author's point was that government can control us through the words. In the novel, George Orwell believes that the words are very powerful and those words can control human beings, he says. The next novel is uh, Anna Karenina by one of the greatest Russian novelists, Leo Tolstoy. And the first line runs like this: all happy families are alike, each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. The novel was written in 1878 and the novel is divided into 8 parts. The plot centers on an extramarital affair between Anna and dashing cavalry officer Count Alexei Vronsky that scandalizes the social circles of St. Petersburg and forces the young lovers to flee to Italy in a search of happiness. Uh, the complexity and the dilemma of Anna Karenina derives from Tolstoy's use of the double plot. The novel uses double plot. While Anna is the central symbolic figure of the story, Konstantin Levin is its hero. There are two heroes in the novel. One is Anna Karenina and another one is Levin. Anna and those around her derive their life experience from the highly developed standards of urban civilization, while Levin is a product of the less rigid individualistic circumstances that obtain in the country. His values derive from his deep rooted attachment to his ancestral property, while Anna's depend upon her social role as a high society matron. Despite their opposite backgrounds, both protagonists seek a deeper meaning for life beyond the society defined restrictions of contemporary society. Primarily, Anna and Levin seek love as their basic fulfillment. Some critics call Anna Karenina as an epic. Reasons for this are uh, the structure of Anna Karenina. It uses multiple plot, and Anna Karenina is essentially a morphic lacking what Henry James called a deep breathing economy of organic form. Considering them, the novel as epic prose, we must analyze its temper by contrasting Tolstoy with Homer rather than his contemporaries like Flaubert and James Joyce. Uh, the novel Anna Karenina is analyzed as a psychological novel because Tolstoy uses interior monologue. Each major character, through self discourse, exposes his inner life by recapitulating his motivations, his previous experiences, his plans for future action. The interior monologue gives verbal definition to the semi articulate processes of a character's consciousness. Anna's soliloquy as she drives to the place of her suicide is an example of this dramatic device. Because of interior monologue, the novel is considered as a psychological novel by many critics. The next novel is Middlemarch by George Eliot. The first line of the novel reads like this: Miss Brooke had that kind of beauty which seems to be thrown into relief by poor dress. The novel is written in 1872. Middlemarch centers on the lives of residents of Middlemarch, a fictitious Midlands town, from 1829 onwards, the years preceding the 1832 Reform Act. The novel is set in 1829 and from 1829 to 32, 40 years before it was written. As a result, it is considered a historical novel. Middlemarch is considered as a historical novel, although some people argue that the difference between when it is set and when it was published is not significant enough to warrant this term. Middlemarch is very attentive to the historical events of the time, which play a significant role in both the foreground and background of the narrative. The most important of these is the 1832 Reform Act. The novel talks about 1832 Reform Act, which expanded the population of eligible voters in the country and changed aspects of the parliamentary system in order to make it more democratic. And another important event, Catholic Relief Act of 1829, which allowed Catholics to become members of parliament. The rapid developments in science and medicine that took place in the early 19th century and the lead up to the railway boom of the 1840s. All these things are discussed in the novel. That is the reason why Middlemarch is considered as a historical novel. The next novel is The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. The first line is: As Gregor Samsa awoke one morning from uneasy dreams, he found himself transformed in his bed into a monstrous vermin. The novel was written in 1915. The Metamorphosis tells the story of salesman Gregor Samsa, who wakes one morning to find himself inexplicably transformed into a huge insect, subsequently struggling to adjust to this new condition. Kafka, who lived at a time of enormous tension in Austria, Hungary, and in all of Europe, during his formative years, nationalism was on the rise within the pan national Austro Hungarian Empire, leading to the hostility that exploded into war when Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne was assassinated in 1914. 70 million people participated in the war, 9 million of whom died, and by its end in 1918, the Austro Hungarian, Russian, German, and Ottoman empires had dissolved. The war was also significant because so many technologies were used for the first time, such as tanks, airplanes, poison gases, and new forms of artillery, resulting in previously unimaginable scale of destruction. Kafka did not fight in World War I because his job was considered essential, and later because of his tuberculosis, although he wanted to enlist. After the war, Hungary split off from Austria and became communist. Scholars still argue about whether Kafka's writings support communism or malign it, or even if Kafka is political at all. As per his religion, Kafka wrote that he felt separate from his Jewish heritage, though some scholars define him as an example of Jewish literature. And the novel is the outcome of Austro-Hungarian war, which brought about a huge destruction. The next novel is A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man by James Joyce. First line of the novel is, once upon a time, and a very good time it was, there was a moko coming down along the road, and this moko that was coming down along the road met a nice little boy named Baby Tuko. The novel was published in 1916. It is a Kunstelroman in a modernist style. Stepan Didalas is the hero of the novel, and the original title was Stepan Hero. Kunstelroman novel means the novel which deals with the development of an artist is called as Kunstelroman novel, and A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man is a Kunstelroman novel because it deals with the development of Stepan Didalas, an artist. The novel takes place during one of the most turbulent and eventful periods of Irish history. A significant issue during this period was Irish nationalism and separatism. Since the Norman invasion in 12th century, large parts of Ireland had been held under British rule, and in 1801, Ireland became part of the United Kingdom. Throughout the 19th century, and especially after the Great Potato Famines of the 1940s, many Irish people felt growing dissatisfaction with the British rule and dreamed of becoming sovereign nation. Irish separatists splintered into two major groups: Fenians, who favored the use of brute force, and constitutional reformists, who choose to follow a more moderate path within the confines of international law. The novel deals with the Irish struggle for freedom, and the novel is about a person called Stepan Didalas, and the story is also based on a Greek mythological person called Daedalus. The next novel is The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath, and the first line of the novel is, it was a queer, sultry summer. The summer they electrocuted the Rosenbergs, and I didn't know what I was doing in New York. The novel was written in 1963, and it is the only novel by Sylvia Plath. And the novel was published under a pseudonym, Victoria Lucas. The novel is considered to be a roman a clef, which is the novel is an autobiographical one. The novel is set in 1950s America, a time when American society was predominantly shaped by conservative values and patriarchic structures. It was a society that placed particular restrictions on women as it expected them to embody traditional ideals of purity and chastity and to aspire to the life of a suburban mother and homemaker rather than pursuing their own careers. Many women, like Esther Greenwood, felt crushed by the expectations 1950s American society placed on them. The resentment of women is brought about by Sylvia Plath in the novel The Bell Jar. The next novel is Love in the Time of Cholera by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, a Colombian novelist. The first line of the novel reads like this: It was inevitable. The scent of bitter almonds always reminded him of the fate of unrequited love. The novel was written in 1985. The main characters of the novel are Florentino Reiza and Permina Daza. The novel is set in an unnamed city by the Magdalene River that can be loosely identified as Cartagena, Colombia. The novel references various episodes of Colombian history. Colombia's long history of social stratification and wealth disparity are depicted in the differences between the poor, cholera afflicted life of the people in the slave quarters and aristocratic families who struggle to maintain their status. Colombia's first book place in Cartagena in 1949, but countries around the world suffered from various cholera pandemics throughout the 19th century. Cholera causes people to suffer from severe diarrhea, vomiting, and dehydration, leading to mass scale deaths. Uh, the fighting took part largely in rural areas. The novel deals with the pandemics of 19th century which happened in Colombian society. The next novel is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. First line is: It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. The novel was written in 1813, and the heroine, the important character of the novel, is Elizabeth Bennet. Uh, Austen's novels are famous for the way they seem to exist in a small, self contained universe. There are almost no references in her work to the events of larger world. Uh, Austen depictions of life in the tranquil English countryside takes place at the same time when England was fighting for its life against the threat of Napoleon, and all of Europe was embroiled in war and political chaos. No mention is ever made of the immense of a French invasion in her novels. Napoleon was finally defeated by the British at Waterloo in 1815, 2 years before Austen's death. The next novel is A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. First line of the novel is: It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. The novel was written in 1859. The novel tells the story of the French doctor Manet, his 18-year-long imprisonment in the Bastille in Paris, and his release to live in London with his daughter Lucy, whom he had never met. The story is set against the conditions that led up to the French Revolution and the Reign of Terror. Like the American Revolution, the French Revolution was launched in the spirit of rational thought and political liberty. But these ideals of the 18th century Enlightenment period were soon compromised when the French Revolution devolved into the Terror, a violent period of beheadings by the very citizens who overthrew the tyrant's French monarchy. The French Revolution cast a long shadow into 19th century Britain as industrialization seemed to divide the English population into the rich and poor. The novel deals with the themes of French Revolution and the impacts of French Revolution on Europe. The next novel is The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. First line of the novel reads like this: In my younger and more vulnerable years, my father gave me some advice that I have been turning over in my mind ever since. Whenever you feel like criticizing anyone, he told me, just remember that all the people in this world haven't had the advantages that you have had. The novel was written in 1925 and the novel takes place in the fictional towns of West Yugg and East Yugg on prosperous Long Island in the summer of 1922. Uh, Fitzgerald coined the term Jazz Age to refer to the period more commonly known as the Roaring Twenties. Jazz is an American style of music marked by its complex and exuberant mix of rhythms and tonalities. The Great Gatsby portrays a similarity complex mix of emotions and themes that reflect the turbulence of the times. Fresh off the nightmare of World War I, Americans were enjoying the fruits of an economic boom and a renewed sense of possibility. But in The Great Gatsby, Fitzgerald stresses the darker side of the Roaring Twenties, its undercurrent of corruption and its desperate, empty decadence. The next novel is Their Eyes Were Watching God by Jola Neale Hurston. First line of the novel reads like this: Ships at a distance have every man's wish on board. For some they come in with the tide, for others they sail forever on the horizon, never out of sight, never landing until the watcher turns his eyes away in resignation. His dreams mocked to death by time, that is the life of men. The novel was written in 1937. The novel explores main character Jenny Crawford's ripening from a vibrant but voiceless teenage girl into a woman with her finger on the trigger of own destiny. Following the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, all black towns began to emerge in the South in the United States and were soon incorporated into the nation officially. Eatonville, Florida is one such town incorporated into the US on August the 15th, 1887. Uh, Jorah Neale Hurston's work coincided historically with the Harlem Renaissance, though she is actually known for diverging with the politics and ideologies of many writers of the moment, including Langston Hughes, Richard Wright, and Ralph Ellison in particular. Hurston identified as a Republican and so actively spoke against many Harlem Renaissance writers' support of the New Deal and communism. The next and last novel is Slaughterhouse-Five or The Children's Crusade, A Duty Dance with Death by Kurt Vonnegut. First line of the novel reads, All this happened more or less. The novel is written in 1969. The novel is an anti-war science fiction. The story talks about the experiences of Billy Pilgrim. The novel also talks of his capture by the German army. Vonnegut was writing Slaughterhouse-Five during the escalation of the American war in Vietnam, a war that was never declared by Congress and was viewed by many Americans as a complicated, unjust, and unnecessary use of US power. As in World War II, the Vietnam War prompted Congress to call a draft although the divide in public opinion meant that soldiers themselves were caught in a complex political struggle and after years of battle were made to return to a country that did not always congratulate them for the service. Uh, the, the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union, the two emergent powers after World War II, formed the political backdrop to Slaughterhouse-Five. Reports of men killed in Vietnam ran on the nightly news for much of the late 60s and early 70s, and the stockpiling of nuclear arms in the US and the USSR continued until the collapse of the latter in the 1980s. Thus, Vonnegut's World War II novel, describing the deaths of many Germans in Dresden, might be seen as a commentary on more contemporary conditions, a lesson on the horrors of war in any age. Thank you very much. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel Basavaraj Bilgi, and in our second part we will discuss some of the first lines of other important books in English literature. Thank you.